I built a 10-year career in creative marketing without formal training or a degree in the field. I'm going to break down my career story into 4 parts: pre-career, early career, mid-career, and my growth period, and talk about the mindset and micro decisions that I made that allowed me to advance without formal credentials. So when I think about pre-career, I'm thinking about when I was in undergraduate school, primarily starting in junior year. That's when I started thinking about my role in the workforce and what exactly I wanted to do and be. I knew that I had an interest in entertainment, media studies, and communication, but primarily identity representation and storytelling within those fields. At that time, the creative industry looked really different than it does today, and there wasn't as much visibility for what types of occupations you could take on in the creative industry, especially ones that were lucrative and stable. What I did know is that I had an eye for design. I already had a lot of artistic skill sets. I used to draw, sing, write music, etc. And I knew that I wanted to use creative skills to make a difference at a mass level. So I developed an interest in advertising and marketing because that seemed to be the most obvious choice that intersected mass communications, creativity, and business. So the college that I went to was a liberal arts school. It did not have a core curriculum in marketing or business, so there wasn't going to be an easy trajectory for me to figure out how to enter the field that I wanted to be involved in. So what I focused on was putting myself in position to learn the skills that I would need to develop before entering the workforce. And the way that I did that was threefold: through campus jobs, through internships, and through side hustling as a graphic designer for my peers who needed flyers made, etc. At that time, I hadn't been formally trained in graphic design and I wasn't familiar with it, but I did draw and I was an illustrator. I wanted to start learning how to take my drawings and illustrations into digital form, so I started teaching myself how to use Adobe Creative Suite. Now, Adobe Creative Suite at the time was still a software program. It wasn't a cloud-based program. So you had to actually purchase the software and install it into your computer. I'm showing my age, but hey. The cost of the software at that time was definitely out of my budget. I think it was somewhere near $1,000. My mom, being the crafty person that she is, managed to find the software suite available on eBay for like $150. I installed it into my computer, and every spare chance I got, I was teaching myself Photoshop and InDesign. Now, I wanted to expand my expertise in digital design even more, so I ended up getting a job on campus at the Digital Media Laboratory, which required me to have a basic understanding of those software so that I could help folks who came to the lab. And that helped me to build my skills really quickly in my pre-career. The other thing that I focused on pre-career was landing internships at entertainment companies that would give me exposure to what creative marketing looked like in an entertainment context. A lot of the research that I was doing in my school program at that time was about identity representation in entertainment and media. So I was able to use that area of study to make my resume look more attractive for the internship programs that were available. The first internship that I got was a marketing internship with Rough Riders Entertainment, and then a year after that one, I landed an internship at MTV Networks in production management for Spike TV. So now I've got growing self-taught skills in graphic design software, and I'm also getting marketing experience through internships at reputable entertainment companies. At the same time that I'm building up this experience and these skill sets, I'm talking to my classmates, my professors, about any needs that they have for graphic design. And they were always looking for somebody to help out with flyers, so I made myself available for those tasks. That way, by the time I left college, I already had the very beginnings of a graphic design portfolio because of the work that I was doing for my peers and professors. The last thing that I did pre-career that set the stage for my experience in the workforce was when I would come back to Seattle during the summer, I would sign up for classes at a local design school so I could learn things like ad design, art direction, HTML and CSS coding for websites. So I was constantly growing my knowledge and skill set even when I was outside of my academic setting. All of those experiences made it possible for me to land roles in marketing for my first jobs, even without having a marketing or business degree or coming from a school that actually offered that. Ooh, another thing that's worth noting, I created my first personal website, which was just my first and last name.com when I was still a junior in college. And I started populating that site with a portfolio of my most interesting research work and the essays that I had written, as well as some of my graphic design work. I just wanted to create a digital hub where I could start keeping a collection of work that represented my skill set. And that way, when I was going out for internships or jobs, I had a link that I could direct people to so that they could get a fuller picture of what I had to offer. That made a huge difference for me when I went into the job market, because coming out of school without a degree in marketing or business, they needed some other evidence that I knew what I was talking about. My personal website is exactly what made that happen. And I specifically remember hiring managers referencing my website during my interview phase, talking about how well designed it was, how great the quality of the work was, and that gave me a competitive advantage when it came to snagging roles. Now let's talk about early career. I spent a semester at Boston University Graduate School of Communication studying film and television television studies. During that time, I was a teaching assistant for Communications 101, which meant that every single week I was teaching my own class of 20 freshman students communications, which allowed me to immerse myself in the study of the field. I decided very early on that my experience at Boston University wasn't going to be a fit for me, and I actually wanted to take a break from academia and see what it was like to actually work in the field of marketing. So my first postgraduate role was an entry-level marketing administrative assistant role at a public transit agency. The actual tasks of my job were not very glamorous or exciting at all, as you can imagine. It was a lot of processing invoices and it was admin work. It was what it was. But the way that I got the most out of that opportunity was by volunteering to collaborate with other teams within the communications department and make myself available to help with some of the things that they were doing. That allowed me an opportunity to get more face time with professional graphic designers, social media managers, and people who were working in different facets of the marketing experience. Now, I had to learn a tough lesson early on about striking a balance between the role that I was hired for and the other areas of interest that I wanted to pursue, but it did give me a lot of great exposure to the different facets of the marketing field and allow me to be more discerning about what aspects of this field I liked and which facets I wanted to steer clear of. It also gave me the ability to continue building my portfolio because I was able to initiate and be a part of the creation of some campaigns that set the stage for the type of branding work I would do in the future. The other thing that I was doing in my early career was continuing to side hustle as a freelance graphic designer. Now I was venturing into creating logos and full brand identities for small business owners or nonprofit organizations while I was working my full-time job as a marketing admin. In short, I was doing the most in my first job, but it was the thing that kept me motivated when the actual job itself wasn't that inspiring. And I recognized that I could use this opportunity to help carve out a clearer path to where I wanted to go in the creative marketing field. Now, in the middle of my career, after I left that first entry-level job, I was taking on roles that were not very high pay, but that had a high potential for me to grow and have an influence on the organization. So I was working for nonprofit organizations, small to mid-sized businesses, places that still had some flexibility for their marketing department to be shaped and defined by the person who was in the role. I knew that at that point in my life, making top dollar wasn't my priority. I didn't have a lot of financial responsibilities yet. So I prioritized taking on roles where I could grow and learn and be trusted as a developing leader, as opposed to taking roles at brand name corporations where I would get lost in the fray, stuck doing work that wasn't allowing me to progress. I knew that I was a creative problem solver, meaning I like to come into an environment, observe where there's an area of need or an opportunity for improvement, and devise solutions that haven't been thought of. For example, one of the roles that I spent the most time in during my mid-career was as a brand manager at a fine chocolate company. It was a really awesome opportunity for me to grow my skills and learn even more where I shined because it was a company that had an e-commerce platform, that did wholesale distribution across the world, that had their own branded retail locations, and that had a factory tour that was a part of their branding and marketing. Over the course of the nearly 4 years that I spent at the company, I got to touch every single one of those aspects of the business, and not just touch it, but be influential in how it was shaped and formed. I taught myself how to do packaging design so that I could bring ideas to life that I had for specific products. I already had a foundation of understanding of Adobe Creative Suite. I taught myself how to use Adobe Illustrator so that I could actually design the packaging myself on the die lines that were provided by the printer. That not only allowed me to stack my skills, but it saved the company tons of money that they would have had to spend outsourcing for a designer. So having a can-do and will-do attitude absolutely helped me to elevate in those environments. In that role, I ended up getting 3 promotions and doubling my salary within 4 years. Now let's talk about my career growth period. This is the part of my career where I began to think outside of the box about what I was capable of. I had been extremely comfortable in the nonprofit and mid-sized business space, but I hadn't really ever envisioned myself comfortably fitting into the large Fortune 500 company or doing traditional digital marketing. But the experience that I had gained as a brand manager over the past 4 years showed me exactly how important data, analytics, and sales are if you're going to run a successful business. So during this growth period, I started to intentionally leap into opportunities that were outside of my comfort zone. One thing that I did was brought back my side hustle in brand design and strategy, but I started approaching it as a business leader as opposed to a side hustler. I shifted my focus from one-off projects to retainer models where I was working with clients on a monthly basis, creating strategy and doing social media management. I also started to niche down my clientele to purpose-driven brands and underserved entrepreneurs so that I could specialize in the areas that I was most experienced and interested in. Operating as a solo agency founder who was working with clients who were on retainer allowed me to focus on what it's like to drive results for clients, not just create a branding suite for them and send them on their way to execute it, but to really nurture my relationship with the clients and their business endeavors and see the results from the work that I did. That's when I started to transition from thinking of myself as just a creative to thinking of myself as a creative business leader. At the end of the day, business leaders don't pay you to be creative. They pay you to generate creativity that generates results. So I began to really sharpen my skills in that area and become a little bit more analytical about the work that I did in the branding and marketing space, which is key to success in this field. While I was working with my clientele through my solo agency, I also started to build my own tech product for the first time. It was a streaming app focused on Black beauty and personal care. This was absolutely new territory for me as somebody who swore I was going to steer clear from the tech field. But the more that I began to work on it, the more that I realized that my dissonance with the tech field had more to do with concern about my own competency than it did about a distaste for the industry. So I started to build my tech product, and while I was doing that, I built relationships with other tech founders. I participated in a startup accelerator program, and I really started to see the value in applying my creative learnings and skills in this tech space. Creating that product paved the way for me to take on a corporate tech marketing role and immerse myself further in understanding digital marketing from a data-driven perspective. Now, 10 years into my career, I have experience in brand strategy, creative direction, graphic design across multiple touch points, and marketing analytics. And so that is the story of how I crafted a 10-year career without a degree in marketing and without any formal credentials. The key across all of these sections of my career was, number one, being extremely teachable and enthusiastic about learning and stacking my skills at all times, never being comfortable with what I already knew, always seeking to expand on what I know so that I can expand on what I contribute. Number two, having a can-do and will-do attitude, not waiting for someone to assign me something before I recognized a need and figured out a way to fulfill it, or identified a problem and figure out a way to solve it. And three, being very aware of what I was willing to compromise on and what I wanted to prioritize when I selected roles. So from the early to mid part of my career, I knew that if I wanted to occupy positions of influence, it might mean working with organizations that didn't have the budget to pay me a huge salary. But if I was going to be happy in the role, growing and expanding as a leader and contributor, then I was willing to take a lower salary as long as it met my needs and didn't put me in a position of suffering. When you're growing in your career, you're not always going to have everything on the table all at once. It does take a bit of experience for you to get to the point where you can command opportunities that check everything off of your list. So I think it's really key to be honest with yourself about what you're willing to compromise on and what's a non-negotiable when it comes to choosing roles in your career. If you want more, follow me at Branding by Bri, and make sure that you go to the URL in my bio to learn how you can work with me directly to build your brand online.